Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the second day of the 11th month on our Creator's calendar as we comprehend it, which happens to coincide with January 10th, 2026 on the Gregorian calendar. And after having our normal conversations before we got started this morning, one of our sisters was talking about how she wanted to go over the flood account and see how it lined up with the calendar. To which I offered to read through this, and I believe we've done it once before, but we're going to do it again, and it's going to be a little bit different focus today. Specifically, we're going to show how these events, with particularly the flood account, what happened with the year-long cycle of the flood event, as it's recorded in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it relates to the calendar. So this is from scroll number, or it's called 4Q252. And there's fragments of it, as you can see. This is fragment one, and you have two columns here that are covered. This is from the New Translation, and the title of this is called Commentaries on Genesis, as you can see here. Another version that we have is from the study edition, which is right here. It's the same thing, 4Q252, a commentary on Genesis. And then you can see it has the Hebrew first, and then after that, it has the English translation. But it's the same writing, and I was going to go over this one just because it tends to be a little more literal in the words right here. If you see this says 26th, the day of the third month, the fifth day of the week. While on this version of the New Translation, it tells you that things happened on a Thursday or a Wednesday and things of that, or a Sunday and things of that nature, when these words are nowhere in the text. It's used for people's benefits because they, for whatever reason, they use that instead, but I prefer just to have the numbers. If you're familiar with where those words came from, the origin of that in general, and you prefer not to use it, it's easier to just number it the way it is here and keep it literal. But either way, we're going to be going over this, and as we do, we'll look at the calendar here just so you can see what day things land on for comparison. Father willing, this will be edifying for everyone. So it says, in the year 480 of Noach's life, Noach reached the end of them, and Elohim said, My Ruach will not reside in man forever. Their days shall be fixed at 120 years until the end of the waters of the flood. And we mentioned before how this is the actual answer to the mystery of the 120 years. It's mentioned in Genesis that some people have taken to mean different things that are not in the text, but they add it because it sounds good to them, or it's plausible, or for whatever reason comes to mind, but it's not actually written. And I always caution everyone against doing such a thing. It plainly tells us in the Bible, you do not add to nor take away from my words. It's reiterated in the renewed covenant not to think beyond what is written. So I think it's very important that we abide by that like little children and don't do those things. And if we're honest and we remove the presumptions and we only look for what his word informs us these things mean, like his taught ones when they didn't know, they came to him, the word, for the answers instead of just making it up, which was the accusation of the what the heretics were doing. The heretics like Simon the magician, Valentinius, Macrion, or Macion, or however they pronounce his name, and the other Gnostics that rose up, their their faults were making things up, adding to, taking away, doing the very things that we're told not to, and all the perverted doctrines that they believed were even spoken about. The things they did were written down, and we have recorded the evidence of the facts. So I just want to caution everyone, at least look at these things and then don't copy the bad stuff, right? But right here is the only answer I know of to the explanation of what that 120 years means, and it's a simple explanation in the narrative. 480 years, Noach was told that by Yahuah that his ruach would not reside with men forever, and in the 600th year, the flood happened. Right. So right here it says, and the waters of the flood burst over the earth in the year 600 of Noach's life, in the second month, on the first day of the week, on its 17th. On that day, all the springs of the great abyss were split, and the sluices of the sky opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, until the 26th day of the third month, the fifth day of the week. So there's two dates right there. The first one right here, the first day of the week, the 17th day of the month, the second month of the year. This is when the flood began, when the abysses were broken up and the windows of the Shamayim, or the windows of the heavens, if you will, were opened, and the waters poured down for 40 days and 40 nights until they said the 26th day of the third month, which is the fifth day of the week. Wait. Let me get that right again.
Yes.
Yeah, until the 26th day of the third month, fifth day of the week. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Ooh. So from here to right here is exactly 40 days there. And you can count that 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Okay? Then we go back to here. It says, 150 days did the waters hold sway over the earth until the 14th day of the seventh month, the third day of the week. Okay. So then it says, at the end of 150 days, the waters came down 2 days, the fourth day and the fifth day. So the sixth, we'll get back to the English here. So the sixth day, the ark rested on the mountains of Harurat, or Uratu, Ararat there. It was the 17th day of the seventh month. Okay. So our next reference there was that the waters stayed on the earth for 150 days until the 14th day of the seventh month, which is the third day of the week. um, we can count that out. This is 31, that's 61, that's 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that didn't add right to me. It said 150 days, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Plus the 40. There you go. I'm sorry. I'm a little slow there. I think it counts the winter rain starts there, because otherwise it wouldn't fit. Correct? We'll do it again. 30, 60, that's 91. Then you had from, well, the 17th here, we know that's 40 to here, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So it's 45 days plus 91 gives you 126, right? 136. Or, yeah, 136, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, and 50. 150 days. So sorry about that. A little rusty on my math if you can't tell. But that is the 150 days that the waters were had sway upon the earth. And then it says it was there for one, two, and then the third is the 17th day, sixth day of the week. Okay. And then we are continuing. Oh, right here. It says, and the waters continued diminishing until the 10th month on the first day is implied, the fourth day of the week. The peaks of the mountains began to be visible, and at the end of 40 days, when the peaks of the mountains had become visible, Noah opened the window of the ark the first day of the week, which is the 10th day of the 11th month. Okay, so the next point we have is the waters diminishing until the 10th of the first month, which is the fourth day of the week, which would be right here. All right, the first day of the 10th month. And these are the four times that were made appointed times by him that we've already read about in the book of Yobelim, where it talks about when these certain events had or began.
I
This
thought it
one,
was the 10th of the 11th month. Did I misread that?
yes, brother. Just one more time. No problem. It says right here, and the waters continued diminishing until the 10th month on the first day, the fourth day of the week. So it
Right,
can,
but if you keep going, if you go back to that.
okay.
So if you go to Noah opened the window of the ark the first day of the week, which is the 10th day of the 11th month.
Yes, that's the next spot. I was talking about when the mountains became visible is on the Chodesh. That was when he made the Chodesh. There was four of them that are mentioned, the first of the first, the first of the fourth, the first of the seventh, and the first of the 10th, because on those days specifically things happened, right? That's all I was pointing out, but you're not wrong.
Yeah,
So right
got it.
here, thank you, brother. Right here is when the mountain peaks were first visible. And then after another 40 days, it mentions that right here, the first day of the week, the 10th day of the 11th month, is when Noah opened the window there. It said Noah opened the window on the first day of the week, which is the 10th day of the 11th month, and he sent out the dove to see whether the waters had diminished. But it did not find a place of rest and returned to him to the ark. And he waited yet another 7 days and again sent it out. And it returned to him, and in its beak there was a newly plucked olive leaf. It was the 24th of the 11th month, the first of the week. So, right here, he sent it out. It didn't have a place to land. He waited, oops, sorry. He waited another, it said 10 days, or did it? I'm sorry.
Week.
Yeah, he said he waited another week, and then he sent it out again, and it was the 24th.
No, that would be 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, and it says it was the
Send
24th.
it out a week. Right. He sent it out a week. Right. It returned to him.
And then he waited another week, which would have been the 17th. And then he sent it out again, and it returned to him, and its beak was a newly plucked olive leaf. Yes. And then here it says
On the 24th.
right. And it says it was the 24th of the 11th month, the first day of the week. And Noah knew that the waters had diminished from upon the earth. So that's the day that he knew that. It says, and when it says blank right here, you'll find a few places in this text, I believe, and you find it all over the place in like vacate, where it says right here. right? When you see that, it just means there's a space in the text. There's a space between the words that are otherwise pretty well put together. Sometimes it's a division that we'd have a natural chapter break on, and as you see, there's one right here. It puts a space between these. It says, at the end of another 7 days, he sent the dove out, but it did not come back again. It was the first day of the 12th month, the first day of the week. So again, after the 24th of the 11th month, he waited another week, and then he sent it out, and it did not return, and it was the first day of the 12th month. So you were right, brother. He sent it out here. It returned with nothing. He sent it here. It had the olive leaf, and then he sent it out here.
Uh,
Or no, then he knew it was clear. He sent it out here, and it did not return.
right.
And we are on column 19 again, or sorry, 20. It says, and at the end of the 30 days, after having sent out the dove, which did not come back again, the waters dried up from upon the earth, and Noah removed the cover of the ark and looked, and behold, they had dried up on the 4th day of the week, on the first of the first month, which is the other Chodesh there, the one that's mentioned right here. So after the 30 days, on the first day of the month here, the waters were dried up on the earth. And that was where this Remembrance Day was put into place.
Well, I
Now,
have a question that doesn't have to do with blood.
okay, yes, brother.
So we don't have gravity. What do we call, what do we call what most people call gravity?
Oh, no, that's a good question. Now, gravity as a thing, what they think theory of relativity is not a thing. Gravitas means heaviness, like the word kavod means to be heavy or esteemed and honored. So in that sense, it's heavy. But if you're thinking about things in the scientific terms, you're looking at buoyancy and density. However, dense a thing is in the medium that surrounds it depends on whether or not, or whether it has buoyancy, determines whether it can go up or down. And that's true for water or air, ether, whatever you want to call it.
So there isn't, but gravity doesn't exist because of the thing of relativity.
Gravity is not real. The theory of relativity is make believe. It was meant to hide the ether, which is something that they now through quantum physics they agree has to exist. So it was for a time meant to keep people confused, to sell a lie, the heliocentric model, who had no basis in reality or demonstrably provable science to support it. So they said, forgo your senses and believe what we say.
Gotcha. Sister Cindy, were you going to say something?
There's a comment. It's a theory like evolution, not proven. Yes, all the theories, and they have a different meaning for what they say a theory is now. But we'll, I'll read that in just a minute if I can. There's a thing from chapter 1 of Zetetic Astronomy that just is based off the truth and words that are used in scripture, or Greek word zeteo. But I'll get to that. There's a difference between a thing that is make believe or not substantiated and a thing that is proven. And with actual demonstrable science, they've proven things that they tried to hide with the theories. And the only point of the theories was to keep a lie in the minds of men contrary to the scriptures, so that we would turn from his word as the foundation of truth, and hence we would lose our morality, which is what's been going on for the last 500 years. with part of the Counter-Reformation. But that's it's a long subject on a different bend there. So we'll get to that though.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, brother. Um, right here is the only part that is a little bit messed up, and I don't know if it's this version specifically, but even in this text right here, you can see there's a few different things going on. It has the end of the flood account, the cursing of Canaan with the dream vision that Noah had had, and then it goes right into part of talking about Abraham here. So this text isn't a chronologically accurate narrative of any capacity. It was something else. But from the text that we have from Genesis, Yobelim, and whatnot, there's a few different things it mentions here. The idea is that the punishment happened exactly 1 year. It lasted 364 days, which is what this is premising. It started on the 17th of the second month, which is the exact same day that sin entered into the creation with Yahuah and the serpent in the garden, right? This very day, the 17th day of the second month. It's also, it was also significant because that was the beginning of the deliverance of the children out of the land of Egypt. There was something to do with that too. No, no, no. It wasn't their deliverance. It was when they were given manna. So it mentions in the wisdom of Solomon or Hokmah Shalomo that in the ways that the wicked or heathens are punished, in the same ways your own people are benefited, so that everyone can be cognizant of the fact that you are the only true Elohim. And you find that in the things that the dates and things where Satan has turned them to negative things, our creators use them for Tov, where the flood and sin entered in on the 17th day of the second month. He also began feeding his own children with bread from the heavens, the bread of messengers, on that very same day. So while the flood happened then, he rained down manna from above on his children, right? That was the parallel there. But you don't really see that if you don't have significant regard to the calendar here. Either way, we'll go ahead and finish reading. It says, in the 601st year of Noach's life, on the 17th day of the second month, the land was dried up. And on the first of the week, on that day, Noach went out of the ark at the end of a complete year of 364 days. On the first of the week, on the 17th, and then it says on the 1 and 6th from the ark at the appointed time of complete a year. Now, in the other versions, it mentions that it was dry on the 17th, but he waited 10 days and he let all the animals and everything out on the 27th. So that is the discrepancy, if you will. And then one version mentions that it just mentions the 27th. So whichever one is most accurate, I'm not at liberty to just pick and choose, but I am pointing out that these things are written and there are some discrepancies there. I have my opinion on what I think happened, which is the actual events transpiring as he said. And it happened to be dry on the 17th, but they were released on the 27th. I don't see anything wrong with that or a salvation issue in any regard. But it is a difference. So you do compare them. And if you have other accounts that happen to have that corrected or talk about it, please don't hesitate to share. Sometimes these things are specifically mentioned in what we'd call the church fathers. And I use that with air quotes because I don't use the word church or fathers for regard to the truth in any capacity myself. But the ante-Nicene patriarchs, those writings that we have for the first 300 years, are a valuable source of information, especially in regard to what things are meant to mean, where he gave the truth to his taught ones. His taught ones passed them down to the assemblies, and the assemblies faithfully carried them for the first few generations until they were wiped out by the Nicolaitans, known as Catholic Christians. This is the historical facts of what happened. Others are starting to share this more often as well. So, Father willing, it becomes more known history. But either way, back on point. You can see from the beginning of this, it counted a year, starting with the 17th day of the second month, and events that happened specifically throughout this time, leading to exactly 1 year before it was dried, and then they're releasing them 10 days later, right? Now, if you give me just one moment, we're going to cover, oh, sorry, we're going to cover something else real quick. All right, so we read through the account of the flood as it lines up with the calendar there. And now I wanted to cover something. I just reshared this in our Telegram chat. It's a post from January 10th, 2018, so a few years ago. And this is something that I put together. I just said something to chew on, which was a normal, I would usually say that if I was thinking about chewing the cud. If you all remember, it mentions in the letter of Aristes that the character traits of clean animals are things that were meant to be emulated, and the character traits or the things of unclean animals were things that we are meant to abstain from. And the physical, literal commandments were meant to teach a spiritual application. So in the rudiment animals that are clean for our uses, they all do a thing called chewing the cud, where they'll bring things up again to rechew for more nutrients and better, um, it's better for their health and well-being to do so. In the spiritual application of such things, we are to eat his word. And when we bring up the things that we have digested or chewed on, and we chew on it again, we think about it, we ponder these things, it helps us and it's more nourishing in that very same capacity. It is a thing in scripture we haven't got into here. It's not mentioned, I believe, at all, and it's not something I've talked about too much. But when we get into the book of Yahushua, you'll see it, where he says, "Meditate on my word day and night, so that you are keen to do all that is in it, and that you make your way prosperous and are intelligent in all things." And I'm paraphrasing a few different versions of what's there, but essentially, doing his word brings success, intelligence, wisdom, and everything beneficial. And the way to do that is by mumbling it to yourself, or Haggah, to meditate on his word, literally to have it in your mouth, blah, 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 like you're chewing on it. The same kind of concept where you're saying it and you're thinking about it. And that's what this is all about. In specifically in relation to one word right here that we're going to go over, Yachad, or the word for unity, to be united into one. So something to chew on.
Richard,
Yes, brother?
I believe, I'm not certain, but I believe a cow's got four stomachs. And when
Yes.
they chewing the cud, each time they bring that particular cud up, they get the same material, but they get a little more nourishment from it
Yeah.
until all the nourishment is gone out of the material, and then it's passed off. That means that every time we read the word, we will get more. If we, digest the first part, chew it again, you'll find more information. Chew it again, you'll find more. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, brother. And that was the whole point of my mentioning something to chew on here in relation to these texts. So, something to keep in mind and try to do ourselves in regard to this. And for all this, the specific thing I have in mind is this word right here, Yachad, specifically Yod, Cheth, Dalet, which means unity or to be united into one. So, right here, this is from Tehillim or Psalms 122, verses 3 and 4. It says Yarushalem or Yarushalayim is built as a city that is bound together in Yachdu or Yachad, his unity. The wa at the end of a word, they won't always translate it, but when they do, it means it, or more specifically him. It if it's a gender neutral thing, and him when it's specifically about a man. When they're talking about a woman, or if it's a feminine aspect, they'll have a hey at the end of the word. But it says, in Yerushalayim is bound together his unity, in his unity, where the tribes have come up, the tribes of Yah, witnesses to Yisrael. And that remember means to those who strive with Min and El and overcome, or with he who is a prince of El, to give thanks to the name of Yahuah. All right. So they come together in unity for the purpose of giving thanks to his name. And remember, his name, or the Shem of Yahuah, is literally his literal name, but it's also literally his fame, his renown, his character, what he's known for, where he is at. It's literally the word that's used for there in Hebrew. So see how tov and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. The word is gam yachad there. Like precious oil on the head, running down on the beard of Aharon, running down on the collar of his robes, like the dew of Hermon that comes down on the mountains of Zion. For there Yahuwah commanded the Baraka, Chaim Leolam, or life forever. And that's Psalm Tehillim 133, verses 1 through 3. This section right here, I believe, is expounded by Hippolytus. It might be a different taught one in the ante-Nicene writings, but this is gone over in detail where, and you can find this is the explanation for the parables, if you will. But the oil is like the ruach being poured out on our head, which was our Mashiach, running down onto the beard, when the beard in Hebrew is the zakanim. The zakan, or the same word for beard is the word that they have for the elders. So it ran from the head onto the beard, and from the beard onto the collar of the robes, and then onto the robe itself. And this is expounded on as a parable of the Ruach coming down onto our Mashiach, and then from him onto the elders of the assembly, and then onto the people themselves, which is like the untorn garment that was sold and not parted, right? Not cut into pieces. All parables of truth in relation to his people and explained in the writings, not just made up. But you can take that same principle and you can go backwards and see how it fits again in the literal narration of the accounts of the captivity of Babylon, for example, where you have the treasures of the Hekel, all the vessels taken, not everything, some were hidden. It's mentioned in the second Baruch that some things like the ark were hidden and they were not taken. It's not in the list of things that were taken either. But the things that were taken out of the temple were all recorded. The treasures of it, the gold and the silver, the redeemed of his, were removed into Babylon, and then they were returned at the return. And they were all numbered, all known and ordered. Something to keep in mind about what that means. It's the gold is mine and the silver is mine, he says. I believe it's in Amos. It is literally these physical substances he created that will all be coming to him during the millennial reign. But it's also the fact of the meaning of what the gold and silver represent. The redeemed, the ones that suffer their own chastisements and are purified for it, and the ones that are not sinning and put through the crucible, like Job, and as mentioned in Chokmah Shalomo, right? But either way, it's just another way of seeing these parables and echoes of them to get the same pictures over and over, where you're not making things up. And it's literally, these things are written down. I'm telling you what it means, but you don't have to believe me. You can read it for yourself. And that is the whole point. I put the Hebrew here for everyone to look at those. I have extreme regard for the meanings and uses of the original language. You see things in it that you just don't see in the English. unless people translate it accurately, right? But even in the Hebrew here, like the Masoretic text, you have errors. You can't say, well, this must be infallible because it's the Hebrew. Even here, you can see this isn't the original. There's stuff that's been added to it. And we know as a fact that there were things that were changed in the text of the Masoretic versions to hide the evidence of our Mashiach. This is known in things that we've talked about before, so I'm not going to get into it. My point is, it seems like you can get to a point where you can't trust anything, but that's the wrong kind of conclusion to come to. That is what the adversary would like us all to believe. But I want to encourage you, and this isn't really the kind of way I talk too much, but I always have the premise in mind that there's two things that are foundational. Yahuah is always Tov. He's always right, always perfect, always love, right? And we are not. So anytime there's something that comes up where it might give a wrong light to our creator, I never regard it that way. I always regard it as user error because that's exactly what it has to be. When you have someone who is perfect and someone who is not, whenever there's a hiccup, there's only one logical conclusion. Ugh, sorry. And if we don't have that premise, it can really cause problems in our life and in our comprehension. That's something that Kepha goes over as the foundation for what anyone has to believe when they first come to the truth. And he talks about that in the recognitions of Clement as he's preaching to the nations, going around and trying to correct the things that Simon the magician was causing at the time. But either way, my point is you can trust in him. You pray and ask and allow his Ruach to lead you into all truth and believe that he will, and it absolutely will happen. You just have to remember that you reap the thing that you sow. So you give freely of the things that you have, the gifts and treasures you've been given, and he reciprocates. It is that easy. And you can't outgive your maker, right? But right here, here's another use, and I'm sorry, that was a pretty big tangent. I'm kind of going off on things there, but I do think they're important, and sometimes we don't really talk about it as much as we should, but the providence of the Almighty has to be supreme. He's absolutely all powerful, he's absolutely in authority, and he loves man. He wants what is best for us. So right here it says, iron by iron is sharpened, or Yachad, and a man sharpens the face of his friend, or Yachad, the face of his friend. And right here you see Brazil, like the country of South America, in South America, Brazil, the largest known exporter of iron for a long time there. That's what that means in Hebrew. Brazil, by Brazil, Yachad, or made one. They're united. And Ish, Yachad, so and a man is Yachad, or united by the face of his friend. Now, that's another way of saying that if you go along with the wise, you shall be wise, but he who goes with a fool shall be known, because you become like those you associate with. And that's why we're told to separate from the wicked, not to fellowship with them, right? Set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also sent them into the world, and for them I set myself apart, so that they too might be set apart in truth. And I do not pray for these alone, but also for those believing in me through their word, so that they all might be one, Yachad, and I can't tell you that's the actual word that was used there in the Hebrew. Don't have it, but that is the fitting meaning in the plain text that we have for us being united as one, where we are sharpened by the face or countenance of our friend. And we are to emulate Mashiach or emulate Shaul as he emulates Mashiach or copies him, and to follow him as he says to do, which is the perfect fulfillment of the iron sharpening iron, or you're becoming like your friend's countenance here, which is a play on, sure, the ro is also the word for the shepherd, right? But he says, so that they all might be one, or Yachad, as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, so that they too might be one in us, so that the world might believe that you have sent me, and the esteem which you gave me, I have given them, so that they might be one as we are one. I in them, and you in me, so that they might be perfected into one, so that the world knows that you have sent me, and have loved them as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those whom you have given me might be with me where I am, so that they see my esteem, which you have given me, because you loved me before the foundation of the world. Righteous Father, indeed the world did not know you, but I knew you, and these knew that you sent me, and I have made your name known to them, and shall make it known, so that the love with which you loved me might be in them, and I in them. Yahuchanan, or John, Yahuchanan is Yahuwah's favored, 17 through 26. And that has a lot in it. We're united and made one in him as he's one in his Father. That's the correction of the presumption of a trinity, or them being a duality of some kind, because he says, I and my Father are one. Just as he says, he says, look, you truly have to drink my blood and eat my flesh. He later on says, look, truly, my flesh is truly food and my blood is truly drink. And he instituted the renewed covenant in the drinking of the wine and the breaking of the bread in commemoration of his body and blood that are given for us. So he explains these things even while it was confusing to the people. And he did the same here, where he says, I and my Father are one. And then he explains that we can be one as well by disposition, in the same way that he is one with his Father, right? And to do that is to follow him by the example he set, to be made one or sharpened together in Yachad, in unity. So then we continue here. It says, I call upon you, therefore, I, the prisoner of Yahuah, to walk worthily of the calling with which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with patience bearing with one another in love. Humility, meekness, patience, showing the fruits of the Ruach, which is the Ruach poured out on our head, coming down onto the beard, the elders, and then onto the robe, onto the people, being made one in him, right? Like Moshe was the meekest of all men. Dawid had a heart after Yahuah, a man after his own heart. These are witnesses of the Ruach's influence in them, and they're bearing that character, right? Being eager to guard the unity of the Ruach in the bond of Shalom. One body and one Ruach, as you also were called in one expectation of your calling. One Yahuah, one belief, one immersion, one Elohim and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. But to each one of us favor was given according to the measure of the gift of Mashiach. That is why it says, when he went up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. And here's just one of those examples. If you look at the Masoretic text version of the quote there, you'll see that it says, he went up on high, he led captivity captive, or he freed the captives and received gifts from men, or some other difference there. The translation is changed on purpose to hide the meaning, because Yahushua went up on high, where he had witnessed, and you shall see me coming in the clouds, alluding to when he was going to be risen up to present himself to the Father at his resurrection, right? And when he did that, he led the captives free. He led captivity captive to him. The dead were raised with him. And then he poured out the Ruach to men. He gave gifts to them. Yet what does he went up mean, except that he also first went down into the lower parts of the earth? He who went down is also the one who went up far above all the Shamayim to fill all. And he himself gave some as emissaries, and some as foretellers, and some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of the service, to a building up of the body of the Mashiach, until we all come to the unity of the belief. The whole purpose of his having these ministers. All right, until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man. And that's something that I've been talking to my children recently about. All of these things are defined in Scripture. We might come across the term, the integrity of the perfect one, or the upright saves them, right? Or the perfection, the blamelessness, as they have in some translations. The perfect man, right? The one that was a witness in Jacob, he was a perfect man, as opposed to Edom. He was complete. He was a complete man, it says, right? That word for perfect, for blameless, for the integrity of the upright is usually tamim. And it means to be complete, whole, perfect. But the idea of tamim as the definition in his word, you won't find anywhere else that I know of except for in Psalm 19. It tells you, who declares me wicked? Who points out your sins, right? Declare me innocent from those that are secret, and keep your servant back from presumptuous sins. Then I shall be perfect and innocent of great transgression. So the way to be perfect here is not to absolutely have no sin in your life, because there is no man who is perfect and sins not. That's in Ecclesiastes, right? I believe it's also in the wisdom of Shalom. But the idea is that you're not openly, you're not willingly doing anything that you know is prohibited in his word. And when you are like that, when you're not openly doing something that's offensive to him, you're asking forgiveness for the things that you might be doing in ignorance, then you are innocent of great transgression and considered the perfect man, to where your prayers will always be heard when you say them and ask in belief, as it mentions in the epistles of Yahuah, right? It's explained in other places here. That's what gives you power as a believer to ask and make petitions and to have them heard, right? But he says, until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Mashiach, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men, in cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray, but maintaining the truth in love, which in the shalom, joy, peace, right? Patience. We've talked about that in meekness, but maintaining the truth, which is obedience to the word, right? The word is the truth. Maintaining the truth in love. We grow up in all respects into him who is the head, Mashiach, from whom the entire body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the working by which each part does its share, causes growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So this I say and witness in Yahuah, that you should no longer walk as the nations walk, in the futility of their mind, having been darkened in their comprehension, having been estranged from the life of Elohim, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, who having become callous have given themselves up to indecency, to work all uncleanness with greediness. And remember, if you're not doing the word, you will not comprehend. So when you're doing the opposite of what he told you to do, you will not be able to comprehend these things clearly. It's explained very carefully by Kefa. And when you read through, I always encourage people in the fellowship too. More recently, I didn't realize it, I hadn't mentioned it too much beforehand, but we read, my family and I, we read morning and evening with our morning meal and before bed as part of what he said to do as you rise up, as you lie down, and when you go on the way. So every morning, we over breakfast with my children, I read some wisdom literature, either the Proverbs, the Book of Job, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Hokmah Shalomo, Syriac, and repeating through those. Usually it started with just the Proverbs, and we read that over and over and over again. And then we'd also read a psalm, and we'd cycle through the psalms, the Thanksgiving hymns, the odes of Shalomo, and things of that nature. So when you read those, especially the Proverbs, it's a very great way to get your mind in a way to perform what he wants you to do. It gives you the truth and contrasts. It explains things about simple and not being simple, which is another thing that Kefa explains in one particular version of the recognitions that I'll share with you. I just shared it not too long in the Telegram chat, but in the Syriac version, he talks about how the simple-minded will believe the signs of both the first one and the second one that comes. And he says that there's always two, first the evil and then the good. And if you're simple, you'll believe the signs of both. And when you believe the second, you'll also learn not to believe the first and for the reasons for it. But if you choose not to, for whatever reason, it's your own fault for having a wicked disposition. If you are not familiar with what's in the Proverbs about being simple and what it talks about in there, reading what he says there, it makes no sense at all. But if you're familiar with the Proverbs, then what he's explaining is just common sense that instantly clicks with you. And that's the kind of thing that is really triggered through all of Scripture. But that's why I always say, have a firm foundation in what we call the Bible. And then as you get to the apocryphal writings, they'll stand and fall easily on the truth that you're familiar with. You don't have to rely on other people telling you about it. You can read it or hear it and see for yourself and judge it at the bar of truth in your own mind with your own reason, which is what's required of every man and what you will be judged for, right? But right here, it says that they've given themselves up to indecency to work all uncleanness with greediness. But you, for lust, right? Lusts of the flesh, lusts of the mind, life, the desire of riches. But you have not so learned Mashiach, if indeed you have heard him and were taught by him, as truth is in Yahushua, that you put off with regard to your former way of life the old man, being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit, and to be renewed in the ruach of your mind, and that you put on the renewed man, which was created according to Elohim in righteousness and set apartness of the truth. Therefore, having put off the false, speak truth, each one with his neighbor. And it was this part right here that convicted me that I could not use the wrong names and titles when I'm speaking about the one who is the truth or the one who possesses the truth in him. It just did not make sense to me to profess error and say I'm speaking truth. That's not a real thing. And I never felt that way. I've always been uncomfortable with it. I believe as early as 2013, when I first learned for the first time in my life, I came to the knowledge that Lord, or maybe it was before then even, but Lord and the wrong titles were not real. They weren't accurate. Just like whenever the truth is presented to you, whether it's by someone who's nice or rude, how we take the truth and we deal with that ourselves is what we're going to be judged for. So Shalom mentions that whether in pretext or truth, Mashiach is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. So the fact that the truth is being made known is a thing to be grateful for. But everyone's going to be held accountable for what they do, whether you're rude with it and you go beat people over the head with the truth and you go casting curses at everyone that's not perfectly walking right. We're going to be held accountable for those things, right? We're so some of that is mentioned and alluded to by the fruits of trees and how you should not eat of them for the first few years because they're uncircumcised, and how that can relate to the believer's development and growth and what they should refrain from sharing before they've matured. Um, but not everyone's meant to be a teacher either, right? That is specifically talked about. This is therefore, having put off the false, speak truth, each one with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be wroth, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your rage, nor give place to the devil, the adversary, right? Let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is tov, so that he has to share with those in need. Now, this is nothing more than the same thing that Yahuah the immerser was doing for the people as he was immersing them and they were coming to him. What do we do? What do we do? He was giving them the things they needed to do to immediately address the problems that they would have in their occupations or their life or whatever, to correct their actions before the advent of Yahuah, to make the way straight for him. We see here, this is the same thing that was being prepared for the peoples as they were coming to the truth, to correct the things that were being done and make amends for it to prepare for him. Okay. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is tov, for the use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. And do not grieve the Kodesh Ruach of Elohim, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and displeasure and uproar and slander be put away from you, along with all evil, and be kind towards one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as Elohim also forgave you in Mashiach. And that was from Ephesians 4, 1 through 32. And I'm sure you can find many references in other places of scripture that talk about how we are the dwelling place of Elohim and we have to come to the unity of belief. We're all being built up into a spiritual hikel and unity. And it all ties together with this concept of Yachad. But the essence of it and how we are made one is, I figured, in what I'd shared here. And then it was meant for, everyone to think about, chew on. And if you have any more references you can think of, feel free to share, put it in the comments or whatever. And then you can continue this study on your own. So thank you for that. And if you give us one moment, we will probably continue for a bit. All right, so this is the section I wanted to share about the comments from Kefa about being simple. And this is actually part of the what's called the Syriac Clementine recognitions and homilies. It is the Syriac translation of the recognitions of Clement. And the importance of this version is that it actually has the missing chapters from book 3 that are not translated and carried over into English from the Latin and Greek version. The scholars that translated it said it was utterly untranslatable and not of the best authority because it soundly refutes the Trinity, and they were not willing to accept that as something that Kepha said. But this version goes into that in detail. You can read it for yourself, and that's not this part right here, but this This version has a slightly different translation or wording than the Greek and Latin version in a few places. It seems a little more simple in the language. And if you're familiar with the Hallelujah scriptures or the ISR version, the Syriac translation, just like the Aramaic versions, are more in line with that. It goes back to a more literal way of translating the way it would have been spoken then. So, either way, this version or this part right here is going over the signs of the 10 pairs that would come, right? And why Nisida's asking Kepha why people were at fault for believing sorcerers and magicians when they can do the same kind of signs that Moshe could do. And Kepha's explanation only makes sense if you're familiar with what was in the Proverbs there, which I'm about to read this to you and then I'll show you. So it says, and Kepha said, I received your studiousness, for you have not hidden anything within your soul that troubles faith or belief. Wherefore, even a remedy is possible for you to receive. Meaning, since he's not quiet about the things that bother him, he's able to get a remedy quickly. When you have questions and you keep them to yourself, no one can address it but the Ruach in a course of time as he sees fit to do so, right? Do you remember then that I said that the evilest of all is one who disdains learning something that is to his advantage? And Nasita said, I remember. And Kepha said, but furthermore, also this, how Elohim has hidden his truth, so that to those who inquire in the love of truth, he will grant them to find it. And Nasita said, even this I have not forgotten. And Kepha said, what then do you think? That Elohim has buried his truth in the earth and placed a mountain upon it, so that they must greatly dig in order to be able to find it? But it is not so. Rather, even as the earth and the mountains are covered by the veil of the heavens, or the firmament, which hides the heavens above from our view, thus are even his delights, for he determined them to be hidden, so that they may be discovered by those who are worthy. And it's only by doing the things that bring comprehension, as we just mentioned, right? As I formerly said, the first of all pairs that come is evil, but the second is good, so that whoever righteously approaches these matters, if he is simple and wise, will certainly come upon the truth. So if he is simple and wise, I'd say simple or wise, because throughout the scriptures we are to leave the simple ones and walk in the way of comprehension, again, doing the things that bring it. But you have to start simple, and this is the point that he's making. They will certainly come upon the truth. For if at the coming of the first the simple one believes his words and signs, which the Proverbs say the simple one believes every word, but the clever one watches his step, right? It says the simple one goes beyond him and are punished. So beyond the truth. There's a list of things throughout the Proverbs that the simple do that if you pay attention, we are to emulate some and refrain from others and become wise and clever in our actions. But that's the whole premise of reading the Proverbs daily or reading wisdom literature every day and chewing on it, thinking about it, right? And here he's talking about these very things in action. So please bear with me. He says, for first the simple one believes his words and signs, afterward the true one, whenever he comes, makes the first not to be believed. Therefore, the simple one who chooses to believe every person believes the second who is Tov, and he is changed. And so he then learns that it is not right to believe every person. You recognize from the sequence and order of the things said, if then he shall not be convinced by the second, he is rightly found unrighteous because he acts unrighteously. For it is unrighteous for him to believe the first, but not to believe the second. Now, this is talking about the simple. If you're going to believe the magicians because they have magic and they're doing wondrous things and it wows your attention into going off into delusion, you should likewise equally believe the signs and wonders from the coming of Moshe, who does these things with greater signs, able to also do healing, and at later point, even the wizards and the sorcerers or magicians contest that they cannot keep up. So the first signs are proven to be inferior to the latter. And these are all things that a reasonable mind is supposed to be able to see and know. And even if you're simple, you can follow along that these signs, you'll believe him, and then he'll explain why you should not believe the first, because they're into satanic witchcraft, right? It says, or rather, he should explain the reason why he believes the first and does not believe the second. But if he cannot explain, indeed the simple one is contentious, and he approaches these matters without examination. And that would be the example of Pharaoh, who had the evidence of both and chose to just believe what he wanted to. Without proof, then, and according to chance, he casts himself as it happens, like when those who visit idols do homage. By an evil habit, they love the things that hurt them and do not want knowingly to forsake these evil things, and they perish as if thinking they hurt themselves. If therefore this shall happen to those who despise their own advantage, it is impossible thereupon for those in the fear of Elohim to be simple on account of those remaining with them in evil. And this is the part of growing and leaving the simple ones and walking in the way of comprehension, because there are evil ones trying to trip you up, and you have to either fear him and do what he said, or you're going to be following after whatever catches your fancy. Says, that is, those contentious to the truth shall come upon them, and then the things said about the simple. See, and then the things said about the simple, that they'll go beyond him, they'll believe everything, they'll be hurt by it, right? All those things, but this is all said in the Proverbs alone. And that's the thing I wanted to share with you. This particular version makes that very clear to see that it's talking about the simple and wise in such a manner. All right. Just one moment. All right. Sorry about that. We had a little intermission with my granddaughter. She wanted to come in and say hi to everyone and come on camera. So had to take a break for just a moment. But to come back on track here, he says, and then the things said about the simple, which is only what I was talking about. These things about the simple are all throughout the book of Proverbs, which I'll show you or we'll look at in just one moment. I just want to finish reading this so you can get his sense of what he means here first, okay? He says, if then a person who is wise is unrighteous, even he shall come upon these matters without anything profitable to his wisdom for discovering virtue. For it is righteous that one, either disbelieving or believing the first who comes, should also do likewise to the second. But I say that if he knows the truth, and he disbelieved the first, he should not also disbelieve the second. For it is unnecessary, and that means if he knows the truth, that the wicked one will come first, there's the deceiver that will try to lead you astray before the coming of the truth, and that the second one comes with true signs and healings and things of that nature, because the the scriptures identify all these things. How to identify whether someone is of Yahuah or not is if they speak in the name of Yahuah and the thing does not happen, it is not him. It was not from him. They're a false prophet. Don't fear them. If someone speaks in the name of another mighty one and it does happen. That is not from him. That is a false prophet. Do not believe him, right? It doesn't say that the signs won't happen, but it's very specific that only when they occur and it's in his name is the truth enjoined with it. And it's always going to be, there's never a time where it's said and not done according to the truth. So these are things that we can use to identify in our mind what is from him and his ruach and what is not. But there's other ways, and it's all throughout scripture. Let's get back on here real quick. I want to finish this and then I'll show you what it means to be simple in the Proverbs real quick. And then the contrast to be clever is also mentioned there. Both of these are in the Proverbs specifically on how you behave, what to do, how to become clever, the things to look out for, and etc. But here we go. It says, "But I say that if he knows the truth and he disbelieved the first, he should not also disbelieve the second. For it is unnecessary, as is a healthy person near a physician who heals. But if the person believes the first, he should also believe the second. For when he is smitten by the deception of the first, he has need of the healing of the second. Behold, then, you have heard the reason why the evil one comes first, and then the better one second. But concerning signs and wonders, with things corresponding to them, the wonders appropriately distinguish them. For the evil one works things without any use in them, but the better one, things that are helpful." And it goes on to explain that right here, but that is not the point of what we're reading. So we're going to go ahead and stop on that point. And then if you give me just one moment, I'm going to see about finding the information about being simple. So hold on one second. All right, so this is a Facebook post from 2016, April 23rd, 2016. And this is the word study for being simple, the root and the main word. And then I give the Strong's, it's patah, patha, right? And then you have the different Strong's numbers and their use, and pathi right here and its uses. It says, "Looking through it myself, but seems to be about being open to learning of him or folly, yet one who is prone to acting without thinking things through like children." This is the only word translated as simple from the Hebrew, but is also used as fool or one susceptible to being deceived. There are multiple words for fool, and I'll share those later. And this isn't a fool as in the fool, it's a simpleton, as you can see right here. So the dictionary pictures here are from the Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language for Speakers of English from Ernest Klein. It's affectionately called the Red Dictionary. But just to show you, oh, I'll back up again. Sorry. Just to show you here, it says to be simple, be foolish. Okay. It says of uncertain origin, but it developed from pathak to be open wide. Patha. According to others, it's denominated from pati, simpleton or fool, which is another related word there that we just shared as okay. But it means without deliberation, to act suddenly without consideration, or just doing things without thinking, right? He was simple, was foolish, was enticed, was deceived, was persuaded, rather, was deceived. And then you can see it as a different tense there. It's he persuaded, he enticed, seduced, or deceived. It's to be wide, to be spacious, or to be open, folly and simplicity, right? The general idea to be open wide to any suggestion, to believing just about anything that comes your way. Open, simple, naive is another word that we'd put it as, right? Excuse me. There we go. Trying to get to the comments there. All right. And then it looks like I thought I would have the scriptures here. I wanted to see if I do. it looks like I have parts of it, but I don't have the Proverbs there. So these are all different things. Okay. The pictures in the beginning had the Proverbs. And please bear with me. This was a study that, again, done 2016, so 10 years ago, just about. It's been a while, but I was hoping, and I don't see it here. So we have to go back to these pictures. Please forgive me. This one, and there might be more. The links might have it too, but I'm just going to click on this, okay? Right here, these are the different uses. So Proverbs 19:25, 21:11, 22:3. You can see all of the uses down here, and there might be more. The way that you can see these, and we'll go back to it, I'll show you from there. You can go to the Strong's numbers and just click on them. But this is where I went through. I studied every place that it was written. I looked at the Hebrew and I was trying to get a sense of what it was. Right here, it talks about how the simple or the clever one will watch his step, but the simple one goes beyond him, right? That's literally Hebrew, or like Hebrew with a wah there. They don't usually translate that, but it's beyond him. And when you go beyond the truth, that's when the simple get caught up. He is the truth, and simply going beyond him is what causes the problems. So I always say beyond him in the translation from looking at the Hebrew and seeing that that's written that way, but no one that I know of translates it literally in that fashion, just so you know. However, it doesn't mean that it's not true, and it is literally what the word means. Either way, we go right here. You can click on the Strong's numbers, and I always prefer these. You can see this one is used to enlarge, deceive, enlarge, entice, flatter, persuade. A silly one, right? To be open, and hence to be a fool. Then what I like about the Bible Hub in particular is it'll have the Englishman's Concordance, and it'll have a list of every place that this is used throughout the Bible, which is an easy reference of being able to go and then read the entire chapter or everything in context if you want. So you can see where the if in sinners entice you, do not give in, right? Now, this is the specific word for enticing and things of that nature. So we're not quite wanting to look at that. That's to be spacious and wide. We want the one for being simple, specifically getting into this, here we go. So the petit, simple, naive, gullible, being open and susceptible, right? And these are the things where you can go through. It's Psalm 19, Psalm 116, through the Psalms and Proverbs, like I was saying, to really get a sense of what it means. Making wise the simple is part of what the Torah is said to do. And that's in Psalm 19 there. He preserves the simple. He guards the simple ones, right? And that's what Yahuah does, right? He gives comprehension to the simple, but not to everybody, right? We have to be simple before wisdom will even address us to call us in, as you can find. To prudence to the naive, right? How long, you simple ones, will you love your simplicity? We're not to stay in it. We're to leave the simple ones and live and walk in the way of comprehension, as also mentioned in this. So this is what I mean, where you will only find what Kepha means by studying out and being familiar with the simple and how this is used throughout the Proverbs here, throughout the Psalms and its usages in the original covenant writings, specifically here in the wisdom literature. See, comprehend insight, it says, right? Who is naive, let him turn in here, and he who is simple, right? And that's speaking, that's wisdom calling to them to get comprehension, forsake it and live, and like I said, and walk in the way of comprehension, right? So, Father willing, this is starting to make more sense to you, but I highly encourage everyone. This is a study that anyone can look at, and it's another way to confirm in your own mind the validity of these writings. I don't like to just take anything for granted or say, well, this must be inspired because it has someone's name attached to it. That kind of thinking is specifically prohibited even in the Bible. It talks about how we're not to think beyond what is written, and we're not to be putting names and titles or things to on something to give it more significance or importance, but to follow his word and to, in essence, do his will is the whole point, right? Leaving the simple ones and living is the whole point of his walking in wisdom, or his wanting us to walk in wisdom and to do these things. So I do think that this part in particular is very foundational, especially for the legitimacy of the Syriac version of the recognitions here. A lot of people are not familiar with this version, perhaps. They've never heard of it. And actually, this translation is very expensive, or at least it was. To get your hands on this copy of the recognitions now costs, it's unavoidable, or it's unaffordable. It's unavailable online the last time I checked, but it's ranged anywhere from $300 to $900 at different points when you could buy it anymore. They have different versions of this translation, but I can't say that I don't know what's in them. I've never read it. This particular version happens to have those missing chapters that very clearly, using scripture, just like the rest of the book does, it ties in these themes all throughout scripture. It uses scripture and themes to clearly speak about the Father of us all, the only true Elohim, who is incomprehensible, limitless, and invisible. Okay. And then the difference between him, who Ketha titles the self-existent one who did not come into being, that is in contrast to the first created being through whom all things were made and held together by the word of his power, who is the exact representation of the invisible Elohim. But he is not his own father. His father is greater, as he explains. But in this version, it goes over that in detail by Kepha and makes it very clear that the Trinity, as promoted by the Catholics in Rome by the edge of their sword since 380 and the Thessalonian Codex there, is not true. So either way, this is part of learning and growing in the truth. When we have a firm foundation in what's plainly in the Bible, when we can look at these texts and we can go through it. And this is the great thing about the times we live in, where these words, we might not have a perfect translation, but we have everything available to see what translations were made, the differences between them, why things were done the way they are. For most of the discrepancies that we have, there's a reason that is already known and talked about. Now, they might hide these things over time, but the truth can't be hidden. The truth is desiring to be known. He's resurrecting from the dead. He's bringing a people unspotted with him, just like it was foretold in a physical, literal. We're going to be living through the spiritual. It's in the process of making Adam in his likeness and image as that last work before the end, at the end of creation, right? Before the millennial reign. So, Ob willing, everyone starts to see that a little more clearly, and this is making more sense for everyone. I hope that it was not too discombobulated. I know we covered different things and topics today, but it was just kind of how it went. And if you all have any comments, questions, or criticisms, anything you'd like to share or you want expounded on, don't hesitate to share. And you all have a wonderful rest of your Sabbath and a great week ahead. Shavua Tov, and we will talk to you next time. Shalom.